Hi, thank you for checking in. On this little film, what I want to try and do is to just share some thoughts on how we work with posture in Tai Chi. This is a very big subject in Tai Chi and often can appear to be nearly obsessional, but there are good reasons why we want to do this. What I'm not going to try and do is to give you too much in the way of detail on posture. There's two reasons for this. One is I think that detail can be a very personal thing, and if we're not careful, we end up putting ourselves in a shape that is uncomfortable for us or not suitable for us at the time. And the second thing is that these details can vary. There's a degree of variation throughout Tai Chi, different styles, different lineages, different people working in slightly different ways. So what I want to try and do is to just share some ideas about why we do things in Tai Chi. Before we do, please remember, go very carefully. Even if you think something's a good idea, or that you want to do something, or you want to do a particular movement or achieve a certain thing, be very careful. It takes time. The body has to condition. You have to get used to these things. It's not something that is very quick. Also be aware that I don't believe Tai Chi is an art that presents us with a way of doing things. It certainly shouldn't be putting us in a box. And this is very difficult sometimes to work with. We live in a culture where we're inundated with other people's ideas about how our bodies should be. In all sorts of ways this reaches us. My feeling is that Tai Chi helps us to bring out the best in our own bodies and our minds. So don't feel you have to put yourself in a box or to be like somebody else, but rather, once again, try and understand some of the underlying principles that we work with. The term I like to use when we're practicing Tai Chi is that we cultivate these qualities. And if you're going to cultivate something, if you grow a flower, you grow a rose bush, you grow it in a certain way, it's different to other plants. You have to take that into account. It's not a question of good or bad or right or wrong in that sense. So there are a few basic things that we want to think about that I will mention in the course of going through these ideas. But within those boundaries, there is flexibility. You will change over the course of time. So what works for you now isn't necessarily going to be the same as what works for you in 10 years' time, and vice versa. So go very carefully, enjoy your practice. So we can think of working with posture for two main reasons. One is obvious. Good posture is good for us. It's good for our well-being, it's good for our movement, it's good for our general health. So applying ourselves to improving our posture can affect all parts of our lives. And in particular with Tai Chi, we want to look at the movements that we make. We want a certain amount of space for those movements, space for our arms to move, for our legs to move, but also space within the body for the movements of breathing, for circulation of blood and energy, for digestion, for everything really. Anything that involves movement of some kind or another needs a certain amount of space for movement. And a lot of what we do in Tai Chi posture is really about trying to cultivate that space. The second reason is that by thinking about our posture, we're training our attention, we're using our body as a meditative focus. And this is a very important element in Tai Chi, both for mind and body. By learning and developing the ability to come into our bodies, to bring our attention into our bodies in one way or another, we're learning to find a point that is quiet and still and calm. And in very stressful lives, it can be very important just to be able to access that. And if we practice working with our posture, we create the pathways that can help us to do that. So it makes that quietness, that space in the mind, more accessible. The second reason is that as we develop in Tai Chi, and if we're interested in aspects like the internal strength and all these ideas that circulate the Tai Chi world, then using your mind properly is an important part of the whole development. using imagery or using the mind in one way or another. So we train our mind to be aware of the body, to focus, sometimes to concentrate, and so on and so forth. So working with posture trains not only the body, but trains the mind. So to start off with, and don't think of this as relating to any particular exercise or any of the things that I'm talking about. You could work with these ideas in terms of just standing or sitting or even laying on the ground. You could work with your favorite exercise. Try and keep it simple to start off with, and then maybe just explore the different ideas that I'm suggesting as you go into more complex movements. So to begin with, just try and bring your attention into your body. Sometimes it can be quite a good idea to do this sitting down, by the way. If you are getting tired in your legs, it's quite difficult to feel comfortable. But if you're sitting, that chair's taking your weight, more likely you're going to be able to just draw your attention into your body, to become a little bit more aware of that inner space, that inner landscape that is so important to us. So listening to your body, listening to what is happening to your body when you make certain movements, when you do certain things, listen to the changes in your body. Once we start to do that, then we can start to work with ways that our body relates to the outer environment. So one of the first key principles in Tai Chi, I feel, one of the most important things that we do is to line ourselves up with the pull of gravity. Tai Chi was originally a martial art, and as such is very concerned with the way that we respond to forces acting on our body from the outside. And in the solo movements, the most vital force that acts on us all of our lives is the pull of gravity. And we want to try and work out a way of being with the pull of gravity without straining against it. In this way, we gradually develop a tone within the body that is neither rock hard and stiff, not stiff in your joints or your muscles or anything like that, nor on the other hand, just loose and flabby. Neither is acceptable, if you like, neither is desirable. What we want is a muscle tone, a tone within the whole body, not just the muscles, that is elastic, supple, soft, different ways of describing it. The way I sometimes think about it is if you get a balloon and it's blown up and you squeeze on the balloon, it's quite resistance there, but it's never tight, it's never solid. It's not like jabbing your fingers into a wall. So that's the sort of muscle tone that we want to develop, and it takes a while to develop that. It often runs counter to the way that we expect exercise to work in our bodies. So first basic principle is find that line with the pull of gravity. That's an important beginning of the creation of this space within the body. One way you might want to think about it is if you have a drain pipe on the side of your house, if the drain pipe is lined up and if there aren't any kinks in it, the water will flow down very smoothly. That leads us to a second basic principle related to the alignment, which is rooting down, the dropping of our centre of gravity. When we've got that sense of the pull of gravity working through our body, we can get a sense of our weight dropping. Or you might want to think of your centre of gravity as a particular location in the body. I sometimes think of the pelvis as that location, or you can have an image of your centre of gravity like a steel ball there that's going to drop down. But one way or another, you want to get that sense of gravity pulling you down. The lower your centre of gravity, the more stable you are. The lower your centre of gravity, the more open you can be above that point that your centre of gravity has reached. So for instance, if I take this heavy medicine ball, well, it's not that heavy, but it's heavy enough, and I hold it above my head there, fairly soon my shoulders start to stiffen up, and I may even start to wobble around a little bit. But if I let the ball come down and I hold it there, my shoulders are no longer tight and everything above the ball is just that little bit more open and softer. So those two aspects, the alignment and the rooting down, really are talking about the same things, about our relationship with the pull of gravity. It's not just a technical thing. Sometimes we can use images to help us to develop these ideas. So one image I like to think of is that when I've got this upright posture in line with the pull of gravity, it's like there's a pole going up through my body. This might be referred to as central equilibrium, by the way. This introduces the notion of a straight line in the body. That straight line doesn't exist. And it's important to realize that we're imagining this and we're using the idea of straight lines to help us to orientate within our environment in the way that we might use the straight lines on a map, the grid lines on a map, to orientate ourselves. But straight lines don't exist. So I'm not suggesting that we should be perfectly straight, because that would be totally false for the body. It would be an imposition on the body. But we can have this idea of the straight line, and we can have parallel lines going down the side of the body. We can imagine lines going across the body in various places. The hips are a good place for that, solar plexus, the shoulders, so that we can get a sense of how we're relating to the pull of gravity and how we're relating to the ground beneath our feet as well, so that we develop a harmonious relationship with both. And we're not stuck in this posture, or at least we don't stay in this posture. Life isn't that simple. When we go outside, we encounter bumps in the pavement, we lean over to get things when we're shopping, all sorts of things go on that can throw us off that sense of equilibrium, both physically and mentally and emotionally, because remember, this isn't just a physical thing. So, for instance, if I'm standing here and I imagine that pole there, and some of the exercises get us to do this, of course, but if I sway out here, I still want to feel that I'm sort of connected, like a boat is moored to a post in the sea. I may move out away from it, but I will come back to it. I may move that way, I will come back. It's important to maintain an awareness of this post, because if I go too far, I fall. The boat goes on to the rocks. But don't feel that you're stuck in this position, but try and develop this idea of equilibrium, of the straight line that runs potentially through the middle of your body. And don't think of it as a fixed thing. Again, as you develop in Tai Chi, you'll find it changes slightly, but retain it as an image for both mind and body. So in terms of the awareness that we breed by working with posture, we can actually begin to think of that central equilibrium as a location where we can find that space and that quietness. You will come out of it, and some of the exercises will deliberately take you out of it, but we learn to come back to it. We learn to return to the equilibrium, to return to the mountain. Is an image often used in Tai Chi. This also brings up the question of alignments within the body. If we want the body to act like a drain pipe, then it's important that we don't twist and so on and so forth. So, for instance, if I put one knee forwards, I'll come a little bit closer to the camera. What I'm looking for is a line from my hip to my knee down to my foot. I don't want this to happen, because that's going to twist my knee, that's going to block things, it's going to damage the knee as well. And so when we start to look at posture, we're given ideas, knees in line with toes, or knees in line with the ball of the foot. And that has two meanings. One is that your knees and your toes should point in the same direction. And the second thing is that when we go into the sinking postures, it's our hips going back, not our knees going forwards. And so the deeper the posture, the stronger that's going to be on the muscles of the legs. We also therefore need to think about our feet. We don't want our feet just idly turned out. Ideally, I suppose we would have our toes pointing forwards, but many people have have a natural outturn in their feet. Just make sure that's not too big. How I'm standing now is too wide an angle, but I can pull that in, and gradually you'll find that the muscles will conditions in your legs, around your hips, and in your lower back, and this becomes more comfortable to you. But don't force your feet to be straight, because then you can put pressure on your knees. A very slight turnout is acceptable. We also want to think about where the feet are in relation to our hips and our shoulders. And again, we're often told this is feet hip width apart, but that could be measured from the inside of the foot, or the middle of the foot, or the outside of the foot. So I've got that the wrong way around, from the outside of the foot, middle, from the inside. So there's some variation in that as well. It's not out here somewhere. It's a little bit wobbly forwards and backwards, and it's not here because you'll just wobble around like that. So then we begin to extend that up from feet to hips, and then we can work from hips to shoulders. So once we've begun to align the body, and in particular align the legs, we start to release some of the tightness in the upper part of the body. We also want to let our weight sink down. So this will involve a certain amount of curving in the knees. Try not to think of bending your knees. Your knees will bend quite naturally. But the feeling that we're looking for is here, is to let your hips drop back. And it's just, we could refer to it as sitting. So it's really just being aware of the pull of gravity, specifically in this area of hips, buttocks, lower back, and yielding, letting go to that feeling, and just letting your body settle. Not straining to do that. The deeper postures definitely have a value in Tai Chi, and they have to be worked at, and the body has to condition. But the basic feeling is, if I get a chair here, if I sit on the chair, and there, I just let my hips overhang. It's like you're sitting on a fence or something like that. And so effectively what we're trying to do is to create this posture without the chair actually being there. And that will involve an adjustment with the pelvis. That will happen quite naturally. And so we let our center of gravity sink. It's strong in the legs, obviously, but that will condition your legs over a period of time. The deeper postures, as I say, are very valuable, but the basic posture that we want in our lives when we're walking down the road or washing up or whatever we're doing is this rather than this. And remember also that this is not just about the body, that it's actually about your tension dropping with your body. So we associate this dropping posture, this rooted posture, once again with that sense of our thoughts just quietening a little bit. So we align the body, we feel the weight flowing down through the body, we feel our pull of gravity flowing down through our body, if you prefer to think of it like that. We make sure that we're facing the right way, toes, knees, hips, and we gradually begin to open up the upper part of the body. So what we find is that our legs and our backs, that includes the spine, tend to carry the lion's share of the effort to hold our weight up. And the deeper in the body we go, the stronger it is. Again, it's like the balloon, you push your fingers in, the resistance gets stronger as you do that. But again, never solid, never tight. So then we can begin to think about the upper part of the body. So one thing to bear in mind here is that our structure is basically that we're four-footed mammals. We're not that different to our dog or our cat. And so the front of the body has evolved mostly to hang from the back. So the back is the part of the body that will support the ribs and the internal organs. That doesn't mean that there's no muscle tone now. Again, we want that elastic tone, but it does mean that we're not looking for rock hard muscles that will restrict the space and will restrict movement. And it can feel slightly untidy. It can feel as though you're hunched over just a little bit. You get used to that, and so this is one of the big mental adjustments that we have to make. As with the lower body, we want to feel that the upper body is in line with itself. So one thing you will hear said in Tai Chi is that the hips are in line with shoulders. And if you look, when I stand like this, you see where my arms fall, roughly the little ring or middle finger pointing down towards my ankles. If they're back like that, then you're probably leaning back and tightening your chest. If they're more in front, then you're probably hunched over. But again, don't get too fanatical about that, because there can be all sorts of reasons why your arms aren't hanging in that way. Be very careful as we make adjustments in the upper part of our body. As I said, there are no straight lines in our body, and sometimes injury or illness or just habit can produce shapes in the upper body that are quite set in the body. So you might find, for instance, that as one lady once said to me, if you've been carrying children on your hip all your life, as she said, then you would tend to be a bit like that. If that's the case, then to force your body to do this is going to create problems. But you may want to gradually change things, but you should never do it quickly. Likewise, if your work involves, say, working at a keyboard and you habitually spend hours each day hunched over like that, your body will set itself in this position, and so to force yourself into an upright position is the wrong thing to do. Remember, we cultivate these things. So you can have an idea about where you're going to go and just take a nice, easy pathway to. One good way to work with the upper body is to do so in a chair. Once again, I'll bring the chair out. So the advantage of this is that you can sit on the chair and frankly, we can relax and rest. And we can then start to think about, where is the shoulder? One shoulder higher than another, so on and so forth. You can do all these things looking into a mirror if you're comfortable with that, and just gradually feeling the adjustment, feeling how your upper body responds to that line of central equilibrium, and cultivating a pathway towards central equilibrium. This is an ongoing task in Tai Chi. It's not something you ever really, I suspect, reach the end of, because we change as we grow older and we change with the practice. But that then starts to mean that alignment of the body extends from our feet to our shoulders. I've already talked a little bit about the arms, just in the way that I'm looking at this now. To begin with, the arms should never sort of be contrived, but when we start to bring our arms into certain shapes, into certain patterns in the movement, they shouldn't disrupt that feeling of equilibrium. This is why in the Tai Chi and Qigong movements, we're not actively stretching. As I've said to people many times, I'm a big fan of stretching, but it's something that takes the body out of line in order to stretch muscles. It's an important thing to do, but we try not to do it within the context of the exercises, because remember, we're interested in movement. We don't stretch and move at the same time. So I don't want to go into the issue of stretching at the moment. And as a general principle, the majority of the movements that we do in this art are done between the shoulders and the hips, both vertically and horizontally, without too much extension. If I, for instance, extend my arm out here, you can see there's a slight curve in my arm, and I can push it out, but sooner or later this is going to happen. So there's a limit to the movements, and again we want to extend that limit, but we cultivate the extension of that limit. So the arms can be quite variable. There's a few occasions when we do take the arms behind the body a little bit to make use of that elasticity in the body to propel the arms, but those ones are obvious really, and still we don't want to overextend the boundaries. Finally, there's our head. Our head is one of the heaviest parts of the body to work with. It's very dense. It's also very delicate. It's very easily damaged. So it's important that we find the right alignment for it. We don't want our head to drop down, because then the weight of the head is pulling on our neck. Similarly, if it's back there or to the side. But these are all very common habits. So again, we need to make sure that we're working creatively and gently with the head and the neck, and giving the body time to adjust. What we want to get a feeling of is that our head just sits on our shoulders. Remember earlier I talked about the possibility of imagining a straight line here. Think of that as a shelf, and you've just rested a ball on the shelf. You want it to sit there. In practice, what that means is, I'll come a little bit closer so you can see. What happens is our chin pulls back a little bit. So the head rolls slightly. That brings the crown of the head to the top of the body, brings the chin in, and raises this ridge of bone at the back of the skull, the occipital ridge. I like to think of standing by the sea, just looking out towards the horizon, a very, very, very slight angle downwards with my eyes, so not this, but not this, not hanging down, looking at the ground. Your eyes, incidentally, won't stay still. Your eyes naturally scan the environment around you. That's quite normal, so don't try and stop that process. When we do that, and this is very interesting, I think, in the posture, when we pull the chin in, it mirrors the action of the pelvis when we sink down. When we sink down, I'll exaggerate, we sink down, notice how the pelvis tucks under, and at the same time that the back of the head lifts up. So this reinforces that stronger feeling within the back. It's almost like somebody's very gently just pulled at either end. It helps to open up your spine, not straighten it, but open it up. The curves in your spine will tend to listen, and again contributes to this overall feeling of our back being the stronger, the longer, the broader part of the body. And we sometimes, if we look at the energetics in Tai Chi, we can kind of see that reflected in that as well. So once again, work gently with these ideas. Think about the principles. Again, we want space within the body for movement. We want space for external movement. We want our center of gravity low. We don't want to feel that our body's twisted, working against itself. Cultivate these ideas within yourself, rather than looking out and looking at kind of images of what other people think our body should look like, and forcing yourself into them. Above all else, enjoy your practice. This is not meant to be a big judgmental thing on our bodies. This is not meant to make us feel bad about our bodies. Tai Chi is a very gentle art. It can take us into our bodies and just bring out the natural patterns of movements and patterns of standing and sitting within our body in a way that can be very positive for us. So enjoy your practice and work carefully. Thank you very much for watching.